Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I am your host, Adam Selkowitz. Before we start today, I got to tell you this story. I was recognized in an elevator bank yesterday for doing this podcast by another lupus patient who said that she watches the podcast and it's been really helpful and she was so appreciative. And I just wanted to relay that to this audience because I think it's so important that the work we're doing is getting out there, not just for my ego, that was great too, but just know that if you're a guest on this podcast, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're part of the team that's putting together this podcast, that it is having a really positive effect. We just got our first award. We're nominated for a second award. So things are really moving here in season 3. And I just wanted to thank everybody for making it happen, especially our sponsors who, I always thank at the top of these shows. So with that, I have 2 guests today, a mother-daughter combo, both lupus patients. So I think we're going to learn a lot today. I think personally for me, having a daughter with lupus, a lupus-like disease, this is going to be really enlightening for me because Amanda and Ahnna have been through this. So welcome to the show, Amanda Chay and Ahnna Chay. Amanda, I'm going to start with you. We're going to talk. You also wrote a book that just came out in October called The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. So we're going to talk all about that. But first, tell me a little bit about your personal diagnosis and your personal story. And first, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my story is a little different, as everyone's is, because mine expands across decades. So when I was pregnant with Ahnna, I was very, very sick. They call it hyperemesis, which means extreme vomiting. So much so that I was hospitalized 7 times and I had 2 feeding tubes. But no one ever said, hey, what's going on with you, right? So I had her. She turned out lovely. I continued to have another daughter. And then as the years rolled on, I had, a lot of joint pain. And I just thought that I was a beast from working out, which I was. I would have these mouth sores and I would ask the dentist and the dentist would be like, yeah, that's fine. No big deal. And my white blood cell count would be low, or like my vitamin D was low when I lived in Florida. And they were like, you need to get out in the sun. You're very pale. So all of these things happened and no one really had much thought about it. Fast forward to when I moved to North Carolina and I would teach boot camp classes and I would come home and cry on the couch, right? So I finally went to an ortho he said, you were old, first of all. He did one of these. Oh, you're just old. But then I said,
how old were you at the time when he said that?
I was 40.
Yeah.
I know, right? So he ran some blood tests and 2 things showed up. One that I had Sjogren's and the other one, I remember it said 100% I had neonatal lupus. And he was like, you're not a baby. And I'm like, I'm not a baby. And so no one ever looked at that again. They just let it go. So I had Sjogren's. And for about 8 years, I had care of a rheumatologist, but she kept asking me weird questions like, hey, do you have any lung infections? And I'm like, no. Does your chest hurt a lot? And I'm like, no. And she would say, are you losing hair? And I'm like, no, why? And so she asked me this over and over. And I eventually figured out, along with the neonatal, that I probably had lupus. And fast forward to being in COVID, when my hair finally fell out, and that was a big deal for me, I ended up finally testing positive on my ANA. That's what she was waiting for all along. So I probably would have been diagnosed much sooner. But as you know, you need 4 of 11 criteria for diagnosis. And I probably already had 8, but she was waiting for that 9th one to show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when it did show up, how did that change A, your treatment, and B, kind of your perception of what had been going on for all these years?
It did change it. Yeah. So at least on the medication front, I was finally less stubborn and willing to take medication because they offered, Plaquenil a long time ago, but I wouldn't take it because I thought, it's just Sjogren's. It's just some eye and mouth issue. I'm going to be fine. But when I learned it was lupus, I'm like, okay, this is serious. I need to take it. And, quite honestly, even though I thought I had it for so long, getting that diagnosis was a little bit of a gut punch. I, of course, went home and Googled it. I got all those big dry books that talk about lupus. But the reality was I knew no one with this disease. And my family members and my friends, they could love me all they could. But if I couldn't really understand what I was up against, they couldn't know how to support me because I couldn't tell them that. So it was really lonely.
So, Ahnna, how old are you at this time in your life when your mom was at the old age of 40 getting diagnosed with lupus?
Oh gosh. When she was 40, I would have been 16.
Okay. So do you
So
remember this
I think that
time?
was vaguely. Right around the age of 16, I too tested really low for vitamin D, which we thought was weird because I played lacrosse and I was like, I had a crazy goggle tan going on, and it was obvious I was getting a lot of sun every single day. Very obvious. And so that was something that I remember then was having similar symptoms there. And I remember her kind of in passing saying things to me here and there about Sjogren's, and maybe I had it because I had mouth sores and things of that sort too. But I think at the time we didn't know as much was going on with me as I knew my mom just wasn't feeling as well. I was also 16, so I wasn't very in touch with others' emotions yet.
And Amanda, were you purposely sort of not divulging as much to the family or to the kids, or?
Honestly, no. My daughter will stand here and tell me that I am a very open person with my daughters. I freely cry. I feel things and I let them know because I think it's very important to honor it. But I think I simply didn't know the reality. Only, if you can believe it, only when I was writing the book, I would repeatedly yell around the house, holy shit, this disease is bad. This is bad. This is really bad. And my family members would laugh at me. But I think I didn't really know the full extent of how it would impact me until I did a super, deep year and a half long dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good on their behalf, that they didn't know this.
Right.
I wasn't hiding it though.
And I assume that sort of helps you cope too, that you're just sort of, I sort of feel like lupus is a very much a roll with the punches kind of disease. And the better you can kind of tackle those punches one at a time for the whole family, the better success you have with managing it.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember one time having this like, woe is me moment, right? Because if you look at me across the years, since 18, I have worked out, right? I've always been a big health nut. I've done all these things. But when I had a day where I was feeling bad, like the impact of my life. I was like, oh my God, I have done everything. I have eaten so many salads. Why the hell do I end up with this? Of all people, people are probably like, yep, it's you, right? Of course it's you. But for me, I was really, really angry. It's kind of the process of grief. And only when I began to look outside and see how other people were suffering with lupus was I able to be like, ooh, it could be much worse. And that really was life changing to have that perspective there.
Sure. And so tell me, Ahnna, I'm going to bounce back and forth a little bit, but so Ahnna, when did you start realizing, okay, these sort of mini fires that we were putting out that might have been Sjogren's, et cetera, what changed in your life that led to the lupus diagnosis?
There were a lot of different things, honestly. So I hadn't been feeling good. I was having joint pain. I was described it as like growing pains in my joints from when I was probably like 14 on, but I was playing really high contact, high impact sports. I was a dancer. I was gone every single day doing some sort of extracurricular. So I kind of wrote it off as that for years. And then my freshman year of college, I drank out of one of my best friend's water bottle and it gave me mono. And then I got really sick with mono and couldn't figure out why I was so sick. All my other friends had mono. I ended up in the hospital because I could barely breathe one night. And kind of after that, it kickstarted a lot of symptoms and a lot of different things happening in my life. Another big thing that changed in my life, honestly, which sounds so funny, that led me to getting to a diagnosis was I had an ex-boyfriend who would always tell me when I was sick, you're not really sick. You don't have anything. You're healthy. You're fine. Like, I don't know why you think you have an autoimmune disease. Why can't you keep up with me? You're fine. And he told me that for years. So I believed that for years. And then when I was finally single from him, broken up, that's when my mom got diagnosed with lupus. And that's when I too went to the doctor because we noticed a lot of similar symptoms here and there, the joint pain, the mouth ulcers, the brain fogginess, which I don't think either of us really knew was a thing yet, but it was there and it was kind of obvious. So it took a bunch of different little things changing in my life to get to a point where I was ready to be able to have a diagnosis, and to also where doctors were ready to diagnose me with lupus.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask before I continue our story, have you gone back to the ex-boyfriend, or is this going to be the first he's heard about it? And do we get to break the news to him?
We haven't been together for years. I've been with my current boyfriend for 3 years, and he's lovely, and he has a chronic illness as well. So we both understand each other really well, and we're both in a very healthy relationship. We're able to help each other there. So that's been a really positive change there. And luckily I've not gone back, nor would ever.
Adam, so he is not worthy, Adam.
Of course not. Of course not. Anybody who would have
young. It was it was a young relationship. It was when we were young.
Young and dumb.
Yes, very dumb.
What's interesting about what you just said, though, you have a boyfriend with a chronic illness. You have a mother with a chronic illness. You have a chronic illness. So tell me a little bit about how that impacts your handling of your lupus.
I have a lot of people to talk to, which is really nice, because sometimes, not gonna lie, therapy is kind of expensive. It can be expensive to pay for therapy. So not that I use others for a form of therapy, but I'm able to, say I really don't feel well one night. I refuse to go out. I'm 23. All my friends want to go out and drink. My boyfriend and I both don't go out because he has a chronic heart condition. I know it's going to cause my joints to flare up. So the nice thing there is our lifestyles match up with each other, and we're also able to understand what another is going through. And same thing with my mom, being able to have someone as a sounding board to say, I'm still young. And oftentimes I'll think, I'm not ready to push back on this doctor yet. Like I don't want to lose another rheumatologist. God, I don't want to go through that process. My mom will say that's not normal. You should be pushing back. You should stand up for yourself. Here's what I would say, and really help guide me through different points of my life, whether it be, personal, interpersonal, life-wise, work, different things of that sort. My mom's able to be there as a guidance for me through that.
Amanda, how important is that to you, that you took what you learned with your diagnosis and pass that on to Ahnna, and how important is her support to your current treatment and disease management?
I'm sure I could get all deep and I could get all weepy here, but I think the reality is that I feel that one reason I have lupus is simply to support my daughter in this. And not only do I support her, she is just as much as a support to me. So, I think it's a double-edged sword. I could really be racked with guilt that I have, unknowingly brought this on upon my daughter. But I think it's been really helpful to just realize to give myself some kindness and be like, I didn't know any better. If I would have told her, stay out of the sun, take vitamin D, do all of these things, I would have done anything as any parent would do to protect their child. So you know what? This is what we have. I'm so grateful to have her on days when I feel terrible. I will not talk to my husband. I won't talk to anyone. Usually the only one I will talk to is Ahnna. And I can just be like, I feel bad. And she'll know, she gets the gist of it. And it is, it's just such a special relationship I have with her because of this, even though I never wanted it.
Mm-hmm. No, I feel the same way. There are moments that there is some guilt, but I think in the long run, my daughter is 7, and, she's the person she is today because of her diagnosis and how she's battling it. And, I feel like this responsibility to educate her and to kind of show her how to live with a chronic illness.
Yes.
And my hope is that she shows the world how to cure a chronic illness. That's kind of our focus too, is how can we work together to, shine a light on potential treatments and cures and things like that. So, to me, true. I think that's what it's all about.
I would say the reality is that we think our parents have it all together, right? Right? I am this is my first day in this life that I've ever lived. I make so many errors and I do so many different things that allow me to be a better person. And I think to share that with Ahnna, being not that I do things right all the time, like I screw things up, I do things wrong, and just being open and honest with her as I go along this journey. Sure, I give her some things that help. Sometimes she listens and sometimes she doesn't. And that's okay. I probably would have not listened to everything my mom said at that age too. But just that open, communication has been really helpful with us here.
Mm-hmm. And Ahnna, do you ever feel like it's too much? Like, I want my own thing, or has it really just been a bonding and comfort experience?
Gosh, I don't think it's ever been like, oh, I want my own, like experience of this. I think it's always been nice to have someone that gets it and goes through it, because as much as I can tell my friends what's going on with me, as much as I can try to explain it to them, no one really gets it. No one understands it. When you go out and you're like, okay, I need to go home. I'm like, oh, why don't you stay out till 2 a.m.? And I'm like, I'm going to get immensely ill if I stay out till 2 a.m. It's hard for people around you to understand what you're going through. And I think that's always the truth in life. We just all kind of look internally at times, and sometimes what we're going through is enough to deal with. It's too much to deal with someone else's. So it is nice to be able to have someone like my mom to go to and that understands it. And when I say, I feel horrible today, I have lupus brain and I can't think, she knows what it means, because no one else understands what that means unless you have it or you're very close with someone who goes through a similar thing. So it is nice to have, as much as it sucks to have that bond, it is nice to have it as well.
Right. I'm sure.
And Ahnna's really good. She's learned how to have boundaries at a very young age that we, in 40s, almost 50s, we struggle with. So she's learned to be like, I don't want to talk about this, or I'm done, or I don't feel that, this way. And I think that's very wise that, someone who's still in their young 20s, that knowledge is gained from something that has not been the best situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. And so speaking of knowledge, you are now sharing your knowledge with the world. And I want to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. So we'll be right back.
Please visit our online store at lupusla.org. By purchasing Lupus LA products, you are directly supporting lupus patients and their families. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight, and we are talking to Amanda Chay and her daughter, Ahnna Chay. So, Amanda, you wrote this book, Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. It came out in October, so that's just a few months ago from when we're taping this podcast. I know it's going to air a few months from now, but tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write the book.
I'm an avid reader. If you can kind of see, there's books all around me. I've always loved to read, and I knew I would write something, but I just didn't know what. And it's going to sound cliche, but I was walking my dog along the street, and I just had this like lightning bolt idea, like, I can write a book for women about lupus, because I know that lupus has robbed me a part of my health, but there's still a lot left in me that I have control over. And if I can understand that and apply it to women in the areas of their life that doesn't involve some fancy program or a sweater or a supplement, but it involves things that are backed by science, that are small and manageable and easy to add into someone's lives, I thought that would be the most impactful way to share my knowledge of what's helped me with my lupus.
So give me an idea. Is it a how-to book? Is it what makes it different from the other lupus books out there?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's really funny, Adam.
Okay, of course. I expect nothing less.
It's very funny. I like humor in there. There were fun images. I got to create like tits up lupus chick and all these different things. But I tried to show the reality of me being a flawed person. Like, I know what I should have done, and I still screwed it up. I did things wrong. I didn't follow advice, but there's always an opportunity to turn a corner. There's opportunity to do better. And so that's really what they're going to find in there. They're going to find some memoir type of stuff. They're going to find the science back stuff. And then they're going to see how to apply it into their life in simple ways. I did not want to give someone something hard and challenging to do. Like when I studied nutrition and talked to nutritionists, I thought, okay, I'm going to find out the secret food. Maybe it's like frozen cranberries or something, and I'm going to learn and it's going to be all better. But the reality is with almost everything I learned, there's no big secret, right? It's doing those things we know we need to do that are good for our health and finding ways to implement that over and over and over. It's not running a marathon or climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. It's simply doing the things that are boring and non-sexy every single day because they greatly impact our health, which in turn makes lupus more manageable.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's important too is it's not the same for everybody. Lupus is not the same for anybody. So I think I always think that that's helpful too when a book or a publication says, hey, this may work. Part of this may work for you. Part of it may not. And I think that's, lupus is one of those diseases that you just have to, I think, trial and error it a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think that knowing that, I think that like the first chapter, I'm like, take what you leave the rest, or take what you need, leave the rest behind. That mentality out there. Like the idea of mindfulness, right? We all know we should like sit and close our eyes and meditate for X period of time, but we feel guilty when we don't do that. Then the days slip on. And so I think there's ways to add things in, like breath work. Can you just take one moment and follow your breath? Okay, that's impactful. That is, something that can greatly change your life, but we don't want to make it all complicated for you. Let's make it easy and adjust what works for you today, because we know every single day lupus gives us something else.
Right. Of course. Now, I mean, Ahnna, were you part of the book writing? Did you just wait till it came out and to read it? Did you give me kind of your experience with your mom writing this book?
There's a lot of text messages that I got about the book. I think my mom would kind of send me bits of information as she found them out, and she would talk to me about it, when she went through the editing process. I think that's what I heard the most about, because that was the one of the harder parts of the book, it seemed, was getting through and editing down, because she had so many ideas but didn't know which ones to keep and which ones to omit. So I heard a lot about the book. I've read the book since she gave it to me, right before it went to what would the word be for that? Right before it went to stores. And so I didn't read it before it came out. Honestly, for a little bit, I was afraid to read it because I knew I was talked about in it, but I didn't know I was talked about so little. But, everyone has a hard time reading about themselves at times. So, I was a part of the process, but I'd say this was her passion project. And she kind of filled me in on areas when she'd be excited about things or frustrated about things, or if there was a little epiphany moment she had and needed to share it with me at that time being.
Are you now upset that you weren't included more?
No, my mom knows. My mom's the exact opposite of me when it comes to my lupus. I've always said I'm not ready to advocate for it yet. It's enough for me to look internally and have to deal with it. So I'm just kind of figuring things out on my own still about it. So I say we're kind of opposite there with things. So, and there's lots of embarrassing stories I'm sure she could tell about me, and I'm glad she didn't tell them. So.
Well, I'm glad you're here today advocating, because that's a big step. I know your mom mentioned that before we did this interview. So I'm proud of you. I think you're going to feel really good after this, especially once it airs and people, you see the response. I have not had a guest come back yet and say that they regretted sharing their story with our population, because I think they're very appreciative, and it's going to help people. I guarantee it. So Amanda, tell me a little bit about how you decided what to include about Ahnna's story and what to hold back on.
I chose what to use and what not to use. Basically, I was trying to be in her space, knowing, how much she would want me to share. I know this journey wasn't all about her because she was new to the journey. And so I tried to use it like some garlic, right? You're making a stir fry, you got olive oil and ginger and garlic and then all the veggies. So she's a little bit of the spice there, while everything else is going back on the errors I made, or how I screwed up again, or how I felt terrible this time.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great analogy. I like garlic, and garlic is a healthy addition to your diet. So there you go. Tell me a little bit about how your approach to lupus to your own personal lupus changed by going through the process of writing the book?
Man, it did. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good question. It was like, 16 months of deep therapy for me. Many, many tears, rants, raves, no raves really. Maybe just a little rave when the book was done. But I found it very interesting that I would tell people to do things, right? I'm writing out what to do, and it would be a microscope back on me, like, am I doing that? Am I demanding that out of my relationship? Do I stand up for myself that way? I did not anticipate any of that. So it was very introspective, and probably why it made it such a deep experience, in addition to, Lupus being a real jerk at the same time as I was writing it. So it was a very intrinsically motivating experience at times, while my focus was it was almost like I was in a cave, like I was hidden in a cave with my computer typing away. I would come out after 8-10 hours, and then I would just go back in. So it was almost like you were just writing to yourself for so long. And the first time I sent my draft to my editor, I felt like I was sending her a nude picture. It was nudie time because it felt so raw and so exposed. She was just going to be like, "Why are you sending this to me? This is terrible. You need to, go be a UPS driver or something."
And what was her first response after reading it?
Oh, she was so kind. She was so kind. Yeah. And in fact, I had said at the end, I'm like, "Oh, girl, I am done. This book, I'm done. I'm out of here." And she was like, "No, you can't be done." And I'm going no, I'm done. This is like so much for me. And she was like, "You have to stay in. You have to help these women." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
So tell me, okay, so the book launched in October. What was what was sort of the most surprising reaction you got or response?
Someone I know wrote the most beautiful review, and it made me cry. I was sitting in the car driving to West Virginia, reading it, and I just cried and cried because I didn't know my impact that I would make. And she doesn't even have lupus. She has another autoimmune disease, and she had said, like, I sent it on to my doctor and I sent it on to my rheumatologist, and it was just a little view into the idea that it might be impactful for people, because I really didn't know. I'm not a writer. I haven't spent a lot of time doing anything. I did not go and do anything correctly. I didn't have a big following of people. I never read how to write a book. I simply, it's the stubbornness in me. It's the, rebelliousness. I sat down and just wrote, and that's a very big gamble with a year and a half of your life and, close to $20,000.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. No, I commend you for that, because it's a monster undertaking for sure.
Yeah, it's a beast.
What is next? Tell me what's next. Are you going to write another book? Are you going to go on tour? What's the plan?
Kaya, which is Anna's youngest sister, I had said, "Oh, I'm never doing this again." And she'd said to me, "Mom, you need to write a book for children whose mom has lupus." And I'm like, "Fine, but then no more after that." I don't know. I honestly, I've been, if you look back or you go on my LinkedIn, I've done tons of things in my life. I'm going to do a ton more. I honestly don't know. I think at this moment, I'm so happy to have something out there to help women. I'm an open book on, pun intended, on to how I can continue to help people who struggle with lupus going forward. And, got any job opportunities, you let me know. I'm all ears.
I will keep an eye out for sure. Ahnna, what's next for you?
Work. I'm just working. I live in Charlotte, away from my family. So I think right now is just the time of figuring out what I want to do with my life. It's the good old introspective in your 20s phase for me right now. So it's, perfect. I love my job, but I think my next thing is I need to find a hobby. I need to find something else to do besides walk my dog and work.
All right.
Hey, we're going to Taylor Swift. We're going to Taylor Swift in Zurich.
Oh, there you go.
Woohoo.
Fantastic. My wife went. She loved it. Changed her life.
Oh, great.
At least, temporarily, but it was,
hey, it's a positive,
quite
right?
an experience, right? Anytime we can get a positive movement like that, why not?
Right.
Tell me, where can people get the book, Amanda?
You can get it on Amazon right now. And I have a website, Amanda Chay, which is CHAY.com. You can find it there. And I'm on Instagram at Amanda E. Chay.
Show me the book. I see it behind you. Bring it to the camera. Let me see. You got another
Wait,
one
this
there?
is, hold on. This one, let me get the other one for you. That one had my little thing on it. Here it is. Is that in the middle?
Yep. Perfect. Excellent. Nice colors. Love it.
Thank you. I got to
Fantastic.
design that myself. How fun was that?
Excellent. Yes. Our mother-daughter team here, Amanda and Ahnna, thank you so very much for joining the podcast. This was a really terrific conversation. I know our audience will appreciate it, and I really thank you for coming out and talking to me.
Thank you, Adam. I'm so happy to be here with my girl.
Right.
Thanks for having us on.
Feel good.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.